My lords, today we are going to discuss what I believe to be is the most powerful relic currently available to us in the galaxy. I shall describe what it is, how we got it, and why I think it is so powerful. We are also going to discuss the bad and downright ugly, i.e. two relics that, although we went to great effort to acquire, simply pale in comparison. I shall begin with the good, and good is frankly an understatement. This relic is potentially the best available to us right now. The relic I am talking about is called the Continuum, and it has the ability to increase production for all basic resources, i.e. energy, minerals and food, as well as alloy and consumer goods production. We estimate that annual yields will increase by 5%, and if extra resources isn't enough, we have also seen an increase in research output of 5% across the board in all departments. While the passive bonuses are fantastic, our scientists have figured out how to activate the device, and when activated it gives a full year of all the resources discussed, which is incredibly powerful. The relic can only be activated once every 10 years, but nevertheless, a year's worth of Empire output on instant demand is rather fantastic. Dr. Eccleston details their report on how we obtained this wonderful device. We found ourselves on the other side of the rift, surrounded by giant machinery, gears and pinions, twisting in all directions. Each tenth of a second the machine clicked one step forward. A single tooth from one of these gears was nearly the width of our entire ship. It would appear that we are inside a gigantic machine, and there is no beginning or end to the device in sight. A thick misting, swirling nebulae of dense gas and fog drifts through the internals of the machine. Our sensors cannot penetrate very far, but we shall attempt to explore this fog. We've drifted further into the depths of the fog, but we have been able to gather much more insight on this marvellous machine. Its movement appears to be as precise as our most accurate atomic clocks. Though we have not been able to determine its power source, we have, with some exploring, found a shaft extending into a series of astral rifts. Perhaps it consumes its power from a different plane of reality. Whatever this place is, it has been made with a purpose in mind. It would appear that this machine reaches into many universes, through many astral rifts. The movement of its massive components is creating turbulence in the dense atmosphere. It's making it quite difficult to steady our instruments and the ship. With some rudimentary manipulation, we think that we could slip one of the shafts loose and use it to jam a pair of the rotating cogs. This would quiet the agitation of the atmosphere and allow us a much more intimate study of the machine. However, at this time, I felt that interfering with the device before we knew more about it would be reprehensibly irresponsible. We have no idea what the machine's purpose is, and as such, I feel like we should observe for longer. Several days have passed since my previous entry, and we haven't learned very much more. The architects of this device clearly have knowledge far beyond our own. Interfering with the mechanisms would likely have wildly unpredictable consequences. Despite the disruption from the fog, we have lingered long enough to gain useful engineering insights on the precise construction of the machine, as well as collected a sizable amount of astral material. Whoever maintains the device must be a grand architect indeed. However, I feel that we have studied the machine long enough, and although we still don't fully understand its purpose, we've learned all we can without interfering directly with the device. As such, I've given the order to jam the gears. With a great shudder, the entire mechanism came to a halt. Our attempt at sabotage was successful. As tension grew within the device, a golden core became exposed under one of the reticulated plates. Glowing and pristine, it will only be accessible for a short time. Invariably, the growing tension will clear the blockage, but we have already begun the delicate process to attempt extraction of the golden core. This will likely take several hours. I'm extremely pleased to report that we have recovered the glowing core from the machine. The surrounding gears now lay oddly silent. All tension around us has been relieved. The network of astral rifts connected to this device have visibly ceased their subtle movements, as if now stopped in time. Of what consequences our actions may have, we cannot be sure, but we have safely retracted our anchor cable and left this space. The recovered core has remarkable temporal properties, which will likely take many decades of research to fully understand. It would appear, my lord, that despite the disruption caused, we have not experienced any post-event negative effects. We have, however, acquired one of the best artifacts I've ever heard of existing in our galaxy. A wonderful outcome. The next relic I shall discuss is called the Celestial Tear, which is, in mine and our scientific community's opinion, quite poor indeed. Dr. Tennant reports on how we acquired this device. As we passed through the rift, the change in pressure upon our ship was as sudden as it was violent. We believe that we have arrived in the depths of what appeared to be a vast body of water. All was dark and quiet, and our instruments showed no sign of life. No floating sediment or particular matter was being detected. There was nothing here except us. And judging by the incredibly high water pressure, we were somewhere deep below the surface of an ocean. We considered the options available to us: head deeper into the body of water, or make for the surface. We opted to head for the surface. Although our vessel could withstand the current levels of pressure with ease, I think we will all feel better once we know where we are. Several hours later, however, and it was apparent that something was clearly wrong. We were travelling through the water at some speed, but had seen no change in the surroundings of our sensor outputs. Our helmsman believes that there is some sort of force acting upon us that our engines cannot overcome. The sensor readings are patchy, but it appears that we may have only moved several centimeters in these few hours. We have two options available to us. We can exit the sphere through the airlock and attach ourselves to low-density inflatables. We may simply float to the surface. We would, however, be leaving the vessel behind. We could also try a short hyperdrive jump. Normally gravity affects our jump drive translations, but given the seriousness of the situation, perhaps we should give it a go. It was, in my opinion, far safer to stay aboard the vessel and attempt the jump. After all, whatever force was holding our ship in place could just as easily do the same to us once we were outside the ship. As such, we spun up and activated our jump drive engines, and it worked. We took several tiny jumps before we reached the surface. After breaking through, we discovered that we were in fact within a planet-sized bubble, floating through the vacuum of space. Our sublight engines, it would seem, were not powerful enough to break us free of the bubble's gravity. The space around us looks like if a star-sized bottle of liquid exploded in low gravity. Planet-sized bubbles of crystalline liquid float all around us. There is a nearby star which we have moved into high orbit. It looks old, dark, and cold, but there was something else. It was not a star, but just as big. It was a construct, a megastructure of massive interconnected fragments, like a three-dimensional puzzle on a gigantic scale. Scans determined that it was composed of various precious metals and minerals that were nearly identical to what was inside the star that it orbited. It is likely that one was formed from the other, or that they were both formed from a common source. On closer inspection, the pieces were slowly moving and shifting. Occasionally a large bubble of new liquid would pour out of the architecture. If this thing was alive, it did not notice us. For such a massive mechanism to exist without caretakers or maintenance, we determined that it must have some sort of autonomy. We attempted to cycle through all available audio frequencies, and then we found something. The device emitted a constant, terrible wailing. The crew's senses quickly became overwhelmed until the comms officer cut the feed. We then sent a simple audio message in English. Do you need help? Upon receiving our communication, the object suddenly awoke. Its pieces pulled outward and began to rotate at incredible speeds. The strength of its gravity well dramatically increased, and our ship began being pulled forward into the device at high acceleration. A fiery sphere, like a small star, emerged from within its pieces. The furnace was present on one side of the object and was slowly spinning towards us, emitting violent heat rays in our direction. It pulsed. Electromagnetic radiation burst forth and our vessel shattered. Every alarm on our ship's consoles activated and signalled terror. Except for one, the translator. A phrase was registered in several of our known languages and written in binary code. The message read, "No hope. I mourn. You leave. Now." Our vessel had reached its material limit, and we pulled the emergency anchor, returning with what specimens we could. Whatever that creature was, it seemed well beyond our ability to interfere with it. We did, however, not come home empty-handed. We managed to acquire a relic called the Celestial Tear. Quite an interesting find. We believe it will increase the habitability of all planets which orbit specific stars, and we also hope it may increase astral thread production. Not the best relic we've ever found, but better than coming home empty-handed. And finally, my lords, onto the downright terrible. The last relic we acquired, at some cost I should add, is quite honestly awful. Dr. Smith reports on how we acquired the Time Crystal. We arrived to find a large desert planet. Abandoned buildings were scattered haphazardly across the sands. The largest of these buildings was a massive dome, and we made our way inside. There was a faint yellow light which bathed the room from floor to ceiling, and the interior's sloping walls were covered in an unknown alien script. At the centre of the chamber was a console with two large buttons, one deep blue and the other a vibrant green. We are attempting to decipher the text on the walls to see if it gives us an indication of what the console's purpose might be, and what the buttons might do. Suddenly, those who remained on board the ship, i.e. not on the planet below, lost all contact with those exploring the ruins. What was for one moment a constant stream of audio, video and telemetry data simply went silent, as though it was no longer there anymore. Fortunately, the emergency anchor was not pulled, or if it was, we would have lost all hope of getting our personnel back from the surface. All they could do aboard the ship was wait. And it was fortunate they did wait, for several hours later, our tech resynchronized, and we regained contact with the surface personnel. Although there was a clear discrepancy in the data, the men and women on the surface had no recollection of the events that caused the sudden silence. And it appeared that during the blackout, they also sent 2 reports, both identical, but yet they only remember sending one. This was all very strange. We have 2 copies of the same report and a gap of several hours in between when they were sent. Calculating the timestamps between these reports, our personnel have 3 hours of relative time before the disconnect is repeated. Translating the text on the walls within this time frame is impractical. Although we have no indication of the function of either of the buttons, the only course of action is to choose one. We decided to choose the blue button. It was, as it turned out, Dr. Smith's favourite colour. Our surface personnel reported that when they pressed the blue button, the chamber resonated with a great grinding sound, and a hidden door suddenly swung open, revealing a second chamber. The walls of that chamber glowed with a faint purple, lighting up a multitude of pictograms that covered every visible surface. There was a second console. As before, the console had exactly 2 buttons, but this time one had an engraving of an isosceles triangle, and the other a regular pentagon. We decided to press the pentagon. Pressing the pentagon caused the floor to rupture, revealing a spiralling staircase that descended deep underground. At the bottom of the staircase was a third chamber, illuminated by a soft blue glow. The walls were completely bare this time, but as before, this room was dominated by a solitary console with 2 buttons. One depicted 4 dots, and the other showed 6. It was time to roll the dice once more, and we pushed the button with 6 dots. A pedestal with a giant crystal rose from the ground, and all the doors in the complex opened. Chronometers oscillated wildly between extreme values when in close proximity to the crystal. This object must be the source of the time loops, and a key part of the building's purpose. It would appear that the choices within this gauntlet seemed entirely arbitrary. Perhaps they were meant to test the ability to pass information between the loops. Either way, surviving the maze allows us to leave with the crystal. Its ability to affect the flow of time could prove extremely useful. The time crystal, although adding a minor decade of life to our leaders, and improving the rate at which they learn, certainly is not the most useful relic in existence. But nevertheless, it is now ours. Thanks for watching, folks. Which relic is your favourite from the new DLC? Let me know in the comments. And as ever, if you want to hear more Stellaris lore, please click the video on screen now.